second?
I'll second.
All those second, all those in favor of agreeing with the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Awesome. Minutes are approved. Thank you, gentlemen. And lady. All right. So let's see. All right, Chief Gudak, do you want to open up with the APD updates?
Chief Zach is unable to be here tonight. He's actually in the process of going back to Buffalo to load up some of his belongings and make the big push back here with to set up an apartment. So he does apologize for not being able to be here. I think the intentions are to try to make it definitely to the next meeting. A couple things that we did want to talk about: our Assistant Police Academy. We'll be kicking that off in the Thursday night, be the first night, 30-some participants, so we appreciate CPAC pushing that information out for us. Next upcoming event that we have of interest, Wednesday, March 25th, you should have the Coffee with the Cop program flyer in your package there. That'll be at the Hotel Eris, 7 Patton Avenue, be Wednesday, March 25th, 8:30 to 10:30. We'll have members of our downtown unit there, members of the command staff, executive staff, and Chief Zach will be there also with that. And that's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Captain. So as far as the concerns, complaints, accommodations, I think every member has one of the packets for addressing concerns. So if any of y'all have kind of any concerns that you find in the community, all of our members, members of the community as well, if you can give me a heads up about it, or Captain Gudak a heads up about it, or Julie, because that way when we come to a meeting and we have that issue, then the police can address it, if that makes sense. Instead of kind of just putting it off like, in new business and it kind of falls off the deep end, if that makes sense. Yep. So we have kind of a precursor for the chief, for the captain and the police, and that way they can address it. So just to give you guys a heads up on that. And that includes complaints, that includes concerns and accommodations as well, if that makes sense. Does anyone have a question on that? Good. All right, thank you. Just want to address that. Douglas, new presentation.
Okay, today I'm going to cover each region in 3 sections. First, talk about proactive efforts, and those will include all calls for crime prevention, foot patrol, bike patrol, checking businesses, checking residences, community meetings, events, community outreach. Then I'll move into highlighting some of the key insights from the maps and the table, and then finally discuss the communities impacted within those regions. Particularly today, I'll be focusing on domestic violence. So first, in the West, over 412 hours of proactive policing, 68% of which was crime prevention patrols, 14% was spent on foot, and nearly 10 hours was spent in community meetings and events. Violent crime, as you can see in the map, was concentrated around Piscoview Apartments. Property crime was concentrated between Haywood Road and Patton Avenue. We also see small pockets of activity along Smoky Park Highway, particularly around the Goodwill, and then around Exit 44. There was a 32% reduction in overall crime, with the most significant declines occurring among simple assaults and motor vehicle burglaries. There was a slight increase in robbery of individuals and theft. As for communities, Echo Hills and Iwana, for those, Echo Hills is over here. Iwana is all of the east-west Asheville area. They were the 2 most impacted areas, with 18 and 16 property crimes respectively. With 13 incidents in all, West Asheville made up 22% of all domestic violence incidents in February. Both Piscoview and Beaverview each had 3 incidents of domestic violence. The remaining incidents were spread out across the region. For the North, over 98 hours of proactive policing, 47% of which was crime prevention patrols. 37% was spent checking businesses, and 5 hours was spent in community meetings. Violent crime is concentrated around the Hillcrest complex. There's pockets of property crime that appear in the southern portion of Montfort into 5 Points, and then as far north as the Jackson Park, Woolsey neighborhood. There's a 41% reduction overall in crime, the most significant decline occurring among theft, which dropped by 21 incidents compared to January. There was also increases in robbery, individual robbery, and aggravated assault. Montfort was the most impacted area with 3 violent crimes and 7 property crimes, and also had the second highest volume of domestic violence with 10 reported incidents, which includes 3 incidents in Klondike and 1 incident in Hillcrest. For Central Asheville, 408 hours of proactive policing conducted, 41% of which was spent conducting crime prevention patrols, 24.5% was spent on foot, and then 19% was spent on bike patrols. 26.5 hours were spent at community meetings and community events. Violent crime was concentrated downtown from Woodfin Street to Pritchard Park, and then in the South French Broad neighborhood. Property crime concentrated downtown around Pritchard Park. There was a 10% reduction in overall crime, with the most significant declines occurring in theft and motor vehicle burglaries. There was a rise in stolen motor vehicles, with 8 more than in January. Communities impacted. Downtown is the most heavily impacted region, with 4 violent crimes and 33 property crimes. And Central Asheville made up 30.5% of all domestic violence incidents reported. The downtown was the most active, with 12 reported incidents, and there was also 4 incidents at the Aston Towers. In the east, there was over 90 hours of proactive policing conducted, 68% of which was crime prevention patrols. 15% was spent checking residences and businesses, and 11 hours was spent in community meetings. Violent crime was concentrated around the Asheville Mall along South Tunnel Road, and property crime was also concentrated around the Asheville Mall, as well as the 125 Bleacher Boulevard, which is the Walmart. There was an 8% reduction in overall crime, most significant declines occurring among fraud and shoplifting, and there was a slight rise in simple assaults and theft. Oakley neighborhood was the most impacted areas, with 9 property crimes. There was 10 domestic violence incidents reported in the east, and while 4 occurred along North Tunnel Road, or most of the hotels there, most often of them were spread out across the region. And then finally in the south, 187 hours of proactive policing conducted, 82.5% of which was crime prevention patrols. The remaining 17.5% was spent conducting foot patrols, checking residences and businesses, and attending community meetings. The heaviest concentrations of both violent and property crime occurred around Airport Road. A smaller concentration of property crime persists along the Hendersonville Road near the Mills Gap area intersection. There was a 9% reduction overall in crime, with the most significant decline occurring among fraud, which was 13 less than in January. There were slight increases in sexual assaults, robbery of individuals, and residential burglary. Shiloh was the most impacted area, with 6 property crimes, and there was 9 domestic violent incidents reported in the south, most of which occurred in the southernmost portion around Airport Road and near the Royal Pines neighborhood. Any of your questions?
Any questions, anybody?
Could you mention, when you referenced the property crimes in the Echo Hills area, do you have any more details about what those were categorized as?
I can follow back up.
Okay.
I don't have it right off the hand.
Thank you.
It is awesome, thank you.
I had a question. For the domestic violence incidences that you're talking about, could those be within a couple of different categories, or are they all pretty much within the assault
Some
category?
of them are assault, but if it doesn't rise to the level of assault, if it's just a domestic violence dispute and there's not a physical altercation, then it's classified as another call. It's non-criminal. Yeah, but I'm covering.
But those incidences are reflected
Yeah.
in the numbers you just shared, but not necessarily.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't see them on the table.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
Unless they were assault or an aggravated assault.
Okay. And would that, the numbers that you're saying, would that also include like a violation of a protective order, or is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
a 50B violation. I
Okay.
believe as well, yeah.
I was curious just what all of that included. Thank you. That's super helpful.
You think of this? Anyone, any other questions, anybody?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Your first line of each of these reports is proactive policing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to the substantial differences among the regions of the level activity?
It's,
In the downtown area, there's a substantially greater number of hours, if I heard you correctly, than in the residential areas of the city.
Yeah.
Can you speak to
The-
how that breaks down?
It's all, the patrols are, and the augment patrols are all determined by the criminal activity that we've had. It's all, we're a data-driven approach. We're mainly looking at the last 30, 60 days to advise, and that's where we have a monthly meeting, a CompStat meeting, where we're advising where's the most crime occurred, and that's where we put the most additional patrols. It's also informed by the historic trends. So we know in certain areas we're going to see rises and increases in crime. That's where we have it. Downtown is one of the only few areas that we have bike patrols. So a lot, like I said, there was like 17% of the activity in town was just about bike patrols. So it just, wherever the crime is, that's where we go, where we have the highest calls for service.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate that.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
One thing we are doing is we are enhancing our bike patrol, and we have particularly focused in our downtown area, but West Asheville and Hall Creek area, we are, matter of fact, we've got a group of officers that are going through bike school this week. So with the districts, we are putting emphasis on that, that we do want the district commanders to use officers on bikes in their areas, in between their calls for service and everything. So we will start enhancing that program out into the district areas outside of the downtown program.
Thank you, Captain. Appreciate it. Thank you again, Douglas. That was great. So I think on unfinished business, y'all, I think we're going to switch and just discuss mediation up front because the city attorney is here, just so we can get it now a little quicker. Just as a preface for everything, so I did call the mediation center. I talked to them, kind of like, what would a mediation look like? And the most important thing, three important things they pretty much told me was that it needs to be confidential, it needs to be voluntary, and it needs to be non-judgmental. Okay, so the issue that we wanted to do with our mediation is probably not going to happen, to be honest with you guys. Us being the mediating board is probably not, doesn't make sense really, especially with the confidentiality issue, especially with the state laws in that regard. So I think we need to start gauging our mediation side of things in regards to those three components. But Brad, if you want to come up and speak on that more, then I'm sure y'all have questions for him as well. So thank you for being here, Brad. Appreciate that.
Thank you, guys. Is this an okay spot?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. Yeah, so as your chairman said, my name's Brad Branham. I'm the Asheville City Attorney. Happy to be here. I really appreciate it. It's actually the first time I've got to come and talk to this board. I think I've met some of you and had the chance to work with a few of you in the past. So it's a pleasure of mine to be here. I can tell you that this is something that, from my understanding, has been a question, and maybe it's better to say a request, that's been coming from this board or prior iterations of it for some time. I think the best thing to start this conversation is to add a little bit of context. You really can't talk about what this board does without at least mentioning the Human Relations Committee, or Commission of Asheville. And I say that because here is a body that was set up to do something somewhat similar to what this body is entrusted with doing. And we have been working with that commission now for a while, your chairman as well, to instill some sort of relational structure that better defines what they do and what you do. And you're a part of that as well. The goal in this is to prevent any sort of chaos or confusion that might occur without you guys having any further direction, but try to empower those two bodies to figure out, in doing it, what's going to work best. What's going to work best without stepping on one another's toes. And I don't want to say limit, but I do believe, I think it's helpful to allow you guys to focus. And I say that in a way because human relations, I think, is still trying to figure out what it is that the world they live in, what is their mission going to be within that world. And I think they are slowly getting to the point where they are beginning to feel some of the strain with people coming to them with issues maybe better suited for this particular body, and vice versa. So we're in the process of drafting up an agreement. We presented that to the HRCA to let them start considering it. But we want to really empower you as city staff within the confines of the documents that establish those boards to figure out how are you guys going to best serve your purpose? How are you best going to coexist with this other body? And then let us help you get there. And I know that one of the big tools that we're trying to get you to be able to focus more specifically on is this mediation component. I think that's a very clear component of what this body was intended to do and the purpose it was intended to serve. So our hope is that we can allow you to begin focusing on those issues, allow HRCA to focus on the issues that they were intended to serve, so that you guys can now work together cooperatively in a way that allows much more focus on those specific issues. So if we can get past that, if we can do a good job of defining setting up the structure. And I say we because I really mean you guys and HRCA with our assistance. The less that we are defining that for you, the better. No one knows how you guys can best serve your job and your duties than you and HRCA, with us as city staff helping to assist you and answer questions. We don't want it to be the other way around. Now, we understand that you've asked, how can we go about establishing this mediation? I'm glad that the chairman has looked into that. We want to help you do that as well. We want to find the best tools, the best process, and put in a procedural set of steps that allows you to begin doing that. Now, obviously, there's questions that go along with that. How is that going to work? I think some attempts in the past maybe didn't come to fruition like we had hoped, but that's fine. Sometimes it takes a couple of steps to get to the real thing. So we want to begin allowing you to focus on those areas and create a path where that's doable. So that being said, we're in the very early stages of this right now. I think it's been very productive thus far, but we really want to help you get to that point where this becomes the kind of body that it was intended to be, the kind of body that serves the purpose that it should serve, both for the police department and for the citizens, and the relations between those bodies. So I've talked enough to start. Again, thank you for letting me be here, but I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss this or any other things that you might have tonight. And if you can't think of tonight, I'll come back again and I'll answer your questions. So anything you'd like to talk about or discuss from this point or others?
Any questions right now?
Maybe a clarification in regards to how we define mediation, because that's sort of a nebulous concept that we're probably all giving different definitions to.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So before we figure out how you're going to do it, you got to figure out what is the thing you want to do. And I think the best way to answer your question is to say that there's some flexibility in how that might work best. We use this term mediation kind of broadly, but what does that mean? And we really got to weigh that against two things. What are sort of your legal limitations? How much power do you have? And within that framework, what is the best way to get something accomplished? All right. So I think that it is advantageously something that we can maybe create a little bit. It doesn't have to be so previously defined that you're married to one particular model of this. I really want to give you guys some options with regard to mediation. Now, generally speaking, a mediation, and you've heard some of the main points, the most important point of mediation is that it is an involuntary process. And I say that because it's different in our general judicial system in that this isn't something that's forced upon you. This is something that the parties voluntarily agree to cooperate in order to try to resolve conflicts, okay? Now people might say, well, what's the point of that? It's all voluntary, no one's gonna show up. I can tell you that the North Carolina state court system has had an involuntary, non-binding mediation set of guidelines for about a generation now. And it is it has turned out to be the single most effective tool to not having to go to court and try a variety of cases for a long, long time. And the numbers show that time and time again. It's a highly effective process if it's structured correctly. You've got two police officers, and you've got multiple people from the police department here, staff and officers, who are showing you that there's a willingness from that organization to participate and have a process where they can be a part of that. I think the citizens, if they see something that's working, will come and be a part of it. We might have to tweak this along the way, get it better and better, but I'd like to maybe sit down with your chair, with you guys, and talk and get some sense from you, some feedback about what you think would work, what are the challenges. Let us help you draft some options about these are some varieties of mediation setups, these are some rules that might work for you, and let you tell us what do you think will work best. But there, you've got some flexibility. It's a long-winded way to say you've got some flexibility, so let's tailor it to make it work.
I hear you saying there's lots of flexibility in that framework, and there's definitely like some specific, nuts and bolts to figure out within the context of being CPAC and addressing conflicts with law enforcement and with that specific entity. But like you just said, mediation and restorative justice have been around for more than a decade, and we have a mediation center here in our community, so there really isn't a need to reinvent the wheel, like these frameworks very much exist. So I'm less concerned about that part, and I would agree with you that law enforcement seems to be on board with this. It felt really positive at our retreat. I felt like we had a really great conversation with that with the Asheville Police Department. It feels like historically with this board, the pushback has maybe been more from a legal perspective and from the city's perspective. So my question and my concern is, and the reason we have you here tonight is I want a more full understanding of what are those legal parameters, and like what are the barriers? Like because this board has been told no in the past about mediation, so why is that? Why have we been told no? And if the answer is no longer no, what legal framework do we have to work within to make that happen? Like those are the questions that I'd really like answered
Good
tonight.
questions all. And let me say, it does appear to be the case that you've been told no in the past.
Like several times.
So let's say, well, you haven't heard no from me yet, so that's a good start. I think this is a really opportune time to re-examine this process and to see what can be done. I think that's why this board was set up. In my humble opinion, it's the number one reason that this board was set up, but obviously you can do other things. Now, what I would say to your second question is, why have you been told no in the past? The answer that I would give, just to step back 1 second, is to say that you really have to remember that there is a difference between a sort of mandatory jurisprudence process, i.e., you can't really hold some kind of quasi-judicial hearing and call it mediation. So some of this is defining the difference between what this voluntary, non-binding mediation process is and what a normal judicial style hearing is, where you are taking in evidence and you're compelling people to show up, you're having witnesses show up, subpoenas are issued. From my own understanding, I wasn't part of these, so I'm speaking in a little bit of hearsay here, third person, but I believe that some of the requests and the proposals regarding mediation started to lean into a much more judicial style process. That's a legal limitation that we're not going to be able to step over.
And I think that may have been a misinterpretation or a miscommunication along the way. I don't think we, at least in my almost 2 years on this board, I don't think I've heard anything really like that. I mean, I think mediation by definition is voluntary. We want to use those frameworks. So I don't think there has been language or conversation about that here. So I'm kind of just trying to figure out, is that what the pushback was?
You know, and that's good, because I can tell you that would be a pushback still. Not just purely from a legal standpoint, but from a practical one. I would tell you that that's really not the best way for this body to
Yeah, and it's not what we're trying to do.
But I can tell you just purely legally from the starting point, this is not a no, for sure. This is absolutely something you can do, and we can assist you with that process. We want to assist you with that process. And are there going to be some legal guardrails that you have to stay within? Yes, absolutely. But that's true for anybody, no matter what you're doing. I think you've got more flexibility with mediation than you do with sort of that judicial-esque process. So I'm going to tell you, from a legal standpoint, this is something your board was set up to do. I believe we absolutely can help you do this. Will there be limitations? You know, it's less about limitations and more just about rules. But yes, I think it's doable. Why you've been turned down in every regard up to this point, I don't know. I can't speak to all of those, and most of those were before my time. But you know, if we steer clear of trying to create another judicial hearing style setup, I think you got a green light, and then it's just about tailoring it.
Okay, so I guess my follow-up question to that is, because like kind of in your initial spiel, it kind of sounded like there was maybe support for HRCA and CPAC in building that procedurally and like going through that process, but then it also kind of sounded like you really wanted CPAC and HRCA to take the lead on that. So I guess I'm wondering like what that support looks like, and do we lean on the mediation center to establish a framework and do our own research, and then kind of we bring that to you and you say green light, or does that support look like a greater level than that? Like what kind of support are we talking about in terms of procedural support that you mentioned?
I think the best way that I can answer that question is to say that it is our goal to fill the gap that you need filled in terms of assistance along the process, but not to overstep ourselves. We as staff feel as though we may have been in the past overly involved and overly heavily handed about these things. We think that so there's documents that establish this board, there's documents, resolutions, and ordinances set up HRCA as well, they tell you a certain amount about what the boards do and do not do, but not a lot, especially about this board. I think your entire governing resolution is like 2 paragraphs, so there's not a lot of information, which means we really want you guys who are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis to be at the table and to say, this is really what we think we would like to do and let us assist you with that, as opposed to the alternative of us telling you, we want you to do this. If you want us to be more involved and direct more, we're happy to do that. You know, if your chairman comes to me and says he'd love me to put together a full proposal to you, I'm happy to do that. I think maybe my suggestion to you would be, give some thought to just very high level, 30,000 feet, of what you think a rough process would work, or what are your goals? Any sort of questions you might have, and let us answer that. And we can sort of trim this down to a directive on city staff, and my office can take it from there and really give you a structure for you to evaluate. And we can tweak it, change things from there. But we really want to serve as an assistant to the board and what it's trying to achieve here. Not an impediment, but hopefully help you as much or as little as you see fit in that process. We're here to guide you if you go past those guardrails to pull you back in, but we don't want to get so far in your way that we're directing and not you.
I have one more question. So talking about confidentiality in this space, like it's like an open meeting space, everything's on public record. So like, is there the potential to have these public meetings that are on record, but also have like a separate mediation space that is confidential, where like the officer and the participant would sign confidentiality agreements? And like, is it possible to do that confidentially as this body, or is that going to be a real big barrier to doing mediation as this body?
It's an important concept to keep in mind, and I'm running through this in my head as you're asking the question. Look, I think we can do it. I think we can achieve it in some way, and I may have to think about how to do this. You know, I'm hearing the suggestion that this body is maybe the facilitating group, which leads to the actual mediation being conducted by a separate party. Then you don't have to worry about those open meeting issues. The confidentiality stuff can be handled much more easily. With regard to how much of a role this body would play in that process, somewhere between the spectrum of slight to 100%, you're going to have to let me think about it a little bit. And I think, again, this is one of those situations where you say, here's what we want to do. And I'm here to help you say, all right, here's how I can get you there, or here's as far as I can get you, and then we'll figure it out. The reality is, you are subject to the open meetings laws in the state of North Carolina. But within those, there are provisions for what's called closed or executive sessions under a very certain few criteria. Now, I throw that out just to say there are avenues we could explore. It is complex, and we need to talk about that more because it's a very risky environment to go into. You really need an attorney there to help you along the way, making sure you never go off the rails on those things. So it's something we can look at and talk more about, but I see at least a couple of options to begin exploring that and get over that. It's extraordinarily important. That part we have to navigate around. We have to build it into your process and account for it. But we account for it. We don't let that stop the development of the process. So more discussion, I think. And I would suggest the best thing to do there is give some thought. What do you want it to look like? How involved do you want to be? Would you prefer that you're the facilitator and the mediations are conducted by some sort of a third-party group? Once you tell us that, we can respond and say, here are the challenges with that. Here's what we would suggest. And this is just a narrowing down to where you really get a final set of details about how it works.
Thank you, Brad. Any other questions y'all have, comments or anything like that?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see, you know, I guess what we attempted to do in the past, and I don't know, maybe you can put it on paper, but what we attempted to do before, why it was shot down, you know, and because I mean, some of you have legal experience, and some of us don't, right? So I don't, again, and I think that's the direction we're trying to move in right now, and that's what we're talking about. But if at some point, even if we just have a conversation amongst ourselves about, you know, at least that would help me.
Sure.
You know, what did we specifically try to do in the past? And I guess from a legal perspective, what was shot down, and then that would give me an idea of kind of how we move forward, and, you know, maybe some of the limitations that may exist, or some of the things that we do have to frequently do.
I think it's a great point. If you don't mind me interrupting, what I would advise, maybe what you do at this point as a body, as step one, is just put together one sheet and say, here's what we proposed in the past. Maybe that's 1, 2, or 3 things. Let us take a look at that and tell you what the issue is there, and maybe it's solvable. Maybe it's not, and we can explain to you so that you know why that won't work.
Sure.
And then, you know, you can tell us, here's what we'd really like to achieve. Again, just very high level to start. And we can start telling you, this is doable, this, you have to account for this, here's a limitation here. And we'll slowly work this down to where you would have some options to think about. It's just a suggestion for the board to think about, but my office is happy to assist, including myself, coming back to this board, talking to you outside individually, or working, you know, during our office time on proposals to help you facilitate this process.
I think it's great. And just a comment, you know, I had a meeting with Captain Hudak, Julie, last week, and I think there's a discrepancy of what we're actually mediating. So my thinking is we're just between, you know, a citizen and an officer. I think it makes sense that we're more the facilitator to push that out to somewhere else because of meeting laws. I don't think we should be mediating anything, to be honest with you. I think that should be left to professionals. Especially after talking to Josh at the retreat, we mentioned that maybe having a mediation section as part of a voluntary program within the IA investigation. Meaning that, hey, if an officer voluntarily does it, it's great. If they don't want to do it, it's fine, it doesn't hurt them. But I think as far as mediating between an officer and a citizen, that should be left to a different party. We facilitate it and make it as part of the process, as part of the complaint structure. That's how I envision it, as far as a citizen and an officer. But as far as community issues, like actual general issues between the community and the police, I think we are more involved with that. Because there's no really confidentiality issues. It's just issues in the community, we talk it out, we figure it out. So I think there's a branch that we split. That's how I'm kind of starting to coalesce around that. Does that make sense?
So the legal limitations to you know, to that model, like in the community type of mediation, they're not as great as obviously.
Correct, because the issue is confidentiality. It's a big deal. So as Brad mentioned, the quasi.
Because that's not really mediation. Like
It's
mediation is
not
between
official.
2 people.
Exactly.
Like when we talk
It's more just a general discussion that we can have, you know, we can discuss more things openly, but it's not anything confidential, just issues in the community. That kind of says away to the town hall to see what's actually going on in the community, what can we work on to mediate actual issues, not discrete issues between an officer and a citizen.
Sure.
So that's how I kind of envision it.
And obviously, we would probably need to kind of define outcomes.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You know, what you know, I think outcomes will help us to, you know, get us there in terms of what it is that we want to do. So, indicators of some sort, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I encourage you to begin just thinking about all of these things. Even if you can't really get to the level of detail right now that you really want to be at the end of the day, we're here to help you do that. We're here to help you say, here are some suggestions about delineating what those outcomes, what those goals would be. And I think you guys are already have been now sort of thinking about these things. I think you are thinking about these things. We're happy to have those conversations to help you get there. That's our goal, is to give you a process that the board, the citizens, and the police department feels a productive one that utilizes the capacity of this group. And it might take a little time for us to get there, but it's better than spinning the wheels forever and just hitting your head against the wall. I feel like that's what's happened for whatever reason up to this point. We consider this a new start. We consider this a chance for us to re-envision this, ask the same questions again that have been asked in the past, and see, is this still a problem, or do we have a way to overcome those obstacles? Because I really do believe there's an avenue here to get you where you need to go to have an effective process.
Sure.
I think we should wait till public comment, only to honor the process, just to make sure. Are you signed up for public comment?
Just speak as the spirit moves me, once you're
Well, no, to honor sort of the process, I think it's best to try and have.
creating a process.
That might be some of our trouble, is that we're creating processes on the fly. I think if we can honor the public comment and the time limit, that might be a more formal way to
Well,
make
but
sure.
he won't be here.
I agree with you, Jeremy. I can always forward a question back to him later, though, too. But I agree with Jeremy. It's fine. We'll hold it. Thank you, Brad. Any other questions from the board to Brad or anything like that? Good.
So we're not going to enable now.
Yeah, I would prefer to hear her question if I'm being honest.
Okay.
Well, I just, I mean, we need to, then maybe we need to move public comments up. I just think that we break protocol when we open up discussion. It's not really a board meeting, so I'm just trying to honor our sort of rights and responsibilities as board members.
Robert, Sandy, how do you feel about that? I mean, either way.
She's been a voice, I mean, maybe, and I think we definitely need to. Maybe we decide this point forward in the future, maybe we can announce, this is how we'll follow
Sure.
protocol. There won't be any deviation from protocol,
Understand.
but I understand Jeremy's point now.
I do.
You don't wanna always make concessions, so.
I understand that.
Yeah.
That's Carol, fine, you can answer your question,
Sure.
ask a question, feel free.
I'm trying to get some clarification. I understand that there's some work to be done on jurisdictional issues between these two advisory bodies. What is less clear to me is whether what you are suggesting more gently than your predecessor's office suggested, and I think all accept that there are some legal limitations. What I need clarification on is whether, when you talk about guide rails, whether they are the same guide rails, as yet not fully defined, the same guide rails for this body as there are for the Human Relations Commission. Whether the legal issues are equally applicable to the two bodies.
So I think the best answer I can give to that is to first say that it is likely that these two bodies are different in a very fundamental way. One, and this is my characterization, I believe that this board serves more of an actionable purpose, where HRCA's is much more advisory policy function. Because of that, this body is really intended, and I think much more likely to deal with individual or even personnel issues. Personnel issues are going to deal with an entirely different and very sort of restrictive legal framework, because there's all these confidentiality laws put in place to protect personnel records. When the HRCA is dealing with not specific individual issues, which I think is where they're probably headed. Well, and I don't want to speak for the HRCA, but, well, it's up to the board to determine, both boards, where they want to be and live together. But if a board, whether it be this one or that, are looking at policy issues, perhaps just as an example, maybe they're seeing particular neighborhoods where there's a much higher rate of complaints that aren't specific to one person, one complainer, or individuals within city government, those same personnel laws may not apply to those conversations. So the same rules would apply to the same matters, but if they're dealing with different things, you might not have the same restrictions on one or the other.
But the confidentiality, for example, as referenced earlier, that would be equally applicable to both bodies if it involves specific circumstances.
Yes, it's a great question.
So
Same person,
HRCA
same
could no
thing,
more
same.
mediate individual complaints.
This is a good question. Yes, if the exact same situation came before this body, and say, for instance, the personnel privacy laws were in place, if it came before the HRCA, exact same rules. No difference in those things. So this board doesn't impose in its founding document or in any other set of laws or ordinances different sets of rules that would not apply exactly the same to HRCA. The question is, how do they define what they're going to do as they work together? And they may end up working in different areas that different laws apply, but if you switch them and they just did the different things, same across the board.
I think, just for a point of clarification, I think we really need to sort of look at adjusting our agenda to open up public comment after presentations. That way that takes care of that. And if we move that to the front end, then we don't have to be that person that says we're really breaking protocol by opening comment during meeting. But I think we can solve both by just adjusting the agenda, because we often do have someone sharing statistics, and then it would be nice to be able to make notes and then have you answer questions, or whoever the presenter is, without breaking protocol.
To make a public comment after everything. thing we do?
Well,
Like,
no,
after,
do a
after-
presentation
Yeah, okay.
first, and then public comment after whatever presentations. we
Kind
have.
of built into every presentation. That makes sense.
But,
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
On the front end, so that,
Sure.
yeah, because,
It's built in.
what's that?
Also the back end,
Well,
so two public comments.
Well,
and that,
right.
yeah, that could, I mean, I think the trick, we also talked at one time about doing a work session
Mhm.
as well as a sort of formal board meeting, and those are two different things as well. Work session, could be more communicative. It just gets, I think, cloudy when we're
Mhm.
amending on the fly.
Totally understand the challenge. It's a good point. It's a good point, thank you.
Sorry.
So do we wanna do that then?
Well, are we, yeah, I think are we done?
Are we-
Then
Any more questions for Brad on this? Brad, thank you so much for being here. It's awesome.
Thank you,
Really
guys.
appreciate it.
And I'm happy to come back anytime.
We appreciate that.
Please feel free to reach out to my office if you have questions on this or anything else. We do want to be an ally to you, and anything we can do, let us know. We're happy to serve.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate your time. And we can talk about the new business.
Yeah.
Future agenda items. Yes, we got future items. Thank you all. So we just took care of mediation. So attendance, and we'll talk about the vacancy first. So we do have, I think y'all have an application in front of you for the staff. So Karen is no longer on the board due to health issues. I think she's moving out of state as well. Just see where it is. So apparently this one has been on. I haven't heard about this application, and it's been over a year since it's been filed with our board, which is a little odd to me. But have you guys had a chance to look it over? Ms. Kathy Banks for the South District, have you looked over? If you want a minute to look that over, feel free. You guys help us do that.
So I know that we were looking at pushing the application deadline out, but last minute we found out this one was still a year ago. So
Yeah,
we
this is the first time I've heard of it.
Yeah,
And it's been over a year, so I'm a little shocked, to be honest with y'all.
I think they were pulling out some of it in opening.
Oh, is that what happened? That makes
Yeah.
sense, though. That does make sense. Yeah, thank you, Julie, for that. That makes sense.
my only thought before we vote would be maybe to contact her to see if she's still interested.
I think Sarah did.
Oh, she did. Okay, all right.
So I think we just approve the application, and then city council votes on it, is my understanding for the process.
Either approve
Is that-
or decide to push out the
Open,
deadline.
yeah.
Okay. Have you guys had a chance to look it over? I would prefer to approve it, to be honest with you, because we have someone who's willing to do it. Sounds like she'd be a potentially great addition. Do you guys have any comment about that? Feel free. Open the floor.
I know they still have the position open, I think it, excuse me, it finished Monday,
Mhm.
for the applications and stuff like that.
And we can,
So
Julie mentioned we can
there's-
push it to, was it
Yeah.
April or something like that?
It's like a month out.
A month out? I mean, we can also continue opening it too. I mean, what do y'all think about that? As far as approving it, or we can push out the application, give time for more people to apply, is what
Yeah,
it sounds
I think that would be best.
Okay.
Because these are fresh people that
Sure.
have, put the application into
Sure.
Sarah and everything.
That's fair.
So, yeah.
What do y'all think about that?
So just 30 days out?
I think it'll be
We
30,
decide.
it'd be about 30 days, give or take. I think it's sometime in mid-April.
So basically at our next meeting, if there were more applicants, we would have some folks to compare to, or it would still just be this one person potentially?
I think that's correct.
I kind of second Sandy on that, to give it 30 days to see if anyone else applies, just to cast a wide net, and
Sure.
then if nobody else applies, we've still got one fish in the net, if that's the case.
Yes, do you want to, can I get a motion to extend the application time? Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All those approve of extending the application time, say aye.
Aye.
So there we go. Thank you, Sandy. Good call. So, I do also, the issue with attendance, I think it's been better overall, to be honest with you. Michael can't be here. We've had a little issue with him, but he's been great recently. He's got to do another meeting, so it's like fine, reach out to us. It's not a problem. But Shauna has been kind of an issue. I've reached out to her, a couple times. She hasn't been at a meeting in a while. Let's see, I said she's been one. I don't like calling people out, but just the reality of the situation. But she hasn't been in a meeting since October. I haven't heard anything about her yet. point where we might need to maybe consider removing her and having the application open up for her share. So I want to give you a heads up on that. I'm kind of leaning towards removing her, to be honest with you. Julie, do you know if I have that ability to do that, or do we need to vote on that? Do we know specifically?
Probably vote on that.
Okay, I'd probably vote on that.
You have the ability to make.
We only have 5 here, we do have quorum. I just put that on you today. Would you guys want to think about that a little bit on the next meeting? But again, the other issue is too, is that with the town hall, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's probably gonna skip April, we're gonna only have the town hall in April.
Right.
So it wouldn't be till May until we vote on it. So that's 2 months.
Policy is 2 meetings in a calendar year? Is that if you miss more than 2
Yeah, she's
meetings?
missed 7 out of 12 in the last 12 months. 75%. So she's at 42% right now.
I would say
You've not heard any?
I reached out to her,
Correspondence?
I've not heard anything from her. Julie hasn't either, I don't believe. We're just getting to the end game of this. And I think it makes sense to kind of do it now.
When does her term end?
I'm not sure.
She's already in her second one.
Second term.
So just the beginning of the second one, or?
Halfway through.
Any other thoughts on that? And then what are you guys thinking? Page number.
I think we honor policy.
Yeah.
I try very hard to be here and.
I know,
Yeah.
you all do,
I think
and I
it's,
appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
okay. I mean,
So can we get a motion, any other discussion we need? Are we all good to go? Yes,
Her
Julie?
term expires June 30th, 22.
22nd.
okay.
But I'm ready to take a vote. Y'all, you feel comfortable with that? As far as everything's concerned? Okay. Can I get a motion to vote to remove Sean from the board?
I'll make the motion.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor of removing Sean from the board say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So removed. And this makes sense, the application now, Julie, so we can maybe open that up too in the same period?
Two.
So we have 2? That's perfect. Thank you all.
At large and a south vacancy posted.
Okay, thank you so much.
And the only thing I ask is if in the minutes we can mention that it was for attendance and that we.
It's only for attendance. I mean, that's it. She's been great when she's been here. I agree with you, so. Thank you for that, Chairman. Appreciate that, y'all. Okay. Attendance, vacancies, we're good to go. Community outreach, Sherry, I know you emailed me a little bit about that. Just want to touch on that a little
Yeah,
bit.
so I didn't really get any events for a community like outreach calendar over the month, but from other committee members. But I think kind of the original spirit of the conversation was, I think, just to keep each other in the loop as these different like community meetings are popping up, because not all of them, like especially what Michael was talking about, those meetings don't necessarily happen on a monthly, quarterly, super regular basis. So I think just being more intentional of shooting emails out to each other to let each other know about those different meetings, so that we can try to be more of a presence as a representative from these groups. And then I was gonna put a calendar together, but the main meetings I could think of were HRCA meetings, the 3rd Thursday of the month, and city council meetings. And I didn't really feel like it was necessary to create a calendar for that. If y'all want me to, I'm happy to do that, but I don't really think we need to unless we're coming up with more regular like community meetings that we wanted to be involved in, or have like a regular presence in. So I also just wanted to, I guess, pose that question to the group of, are there meetings you're already present in, or are there meetings that you think CPAC should have a greater presence in that we're not really like talking about on a regular basis? Like, just throwing that out there as a question to folks.
Well, we have, Sergeant Minder, Kevin, do it. We have, meetings with our, APD officers, obviously, in housing. Do we already have a ready-made calendar for each meeting?
They're on the internal units calendar, but I can share the dates that they schedule. Kind of, it's not like a set, like Thursday of the month.
Right, right.
We leave it up to the property manager and the community members who are in control of the community centers to tell us a date each quarter that we can use to facilitate a meeting between the officers who are on the public housing team and the residents of the specific communities where they work. And then we just kind of push those out. Sometimes it's a month in advance, and
Sure.
sometimes it's a little further out. It just depends on when we can get with them and get a date Pretty much they run Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. Those are the days that we usually have them.
Yeah, true.
The agenda says survey questions. Is there any interest in collecting constructive criticism through the form of a survey targeting directly the communities that are most impacted by
I
crime?
think that's what we want to
We
do.
can summarize those and then bring them back
Mhm.
with real data that we can say, I can bring back to the command staff and say,
I think
we have
Jeremy
this number of complaints.
can speak to that a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think you work on that a little bit.
Yeah, and we talked sort of about with outreach opportunities and a way to share a URL for digital as well as print, so that way you don't limit somebody. If someone wants to fill it out right then and leave it, they can. If they want to mail it in, if they want to go home and think about it. So multiple platforms that we can collect some hard data and start to sort of look for trends with numbers specifically. Again, I don't know rates of response, but it's still.
But it's, I mean, because we are holding community meetings regularly all through the month, but it's one thing to talk to an officer versus talking to your neighbor who's another citizen and knowing that you have an advocate on your side that would bring that voice that you don't have to bring. They don't have to come to the meeting if their voice is already here in some form.
Right, some form. And that was sort of the thought, was to capture that so it's less responsibility for us to have to reiterate what we thought we heard if someone could sort of indicate it. I do think it needs to be a blend of questions, so it's not just a Likert scale, it's not just short answer, but there's sort of opportunities to sort of drill down in areas to look for trends that would be useful. So I'd love, I mean, if you want to maybe talk about.
Well, the main thing is like, how do we build trust? You know, that's like, if it's for the safety of the community and enable us to do the best job that we can do, whatever form that takes, whether that's the interaction you recently had with the police or just something you know generally from your own experience that you would like to see us do better so that we can address that. And we, you know, even if that's incorporated in some kind of training that we do in the future, you know, it doesn't have to be specific to any particular incident.
Yeah, I think it'd be good, worth talking about and coming up with some questions for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. I always appreciate that. Thank you, Jeremy.
And I have, instead of contacting the manager of Hillcrest, I've actually contacted individual residents, because what you just said, building trust, and try to get some grassroots groups, to go in first, you know, and get the ground right, so to speak.
Sure.
To make people feel more at ease, considering the, you know, current vibe and everything of the community, that I've been told about. So I'm definitely, working on that.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think a survey could be a great tool to elicit a lot of feedback from those individuals to bring back here in what could be a very safe, anonymous way for those folks to give really honest feedback like through you. So I think this is a great tool to really empower us to do a different type of outreach and elicit a lot more feedback to bring to this group potentially. So I really appreciate your work on that, Jeremy. And yeah, I think it's great.
Well, and I even, if possible, I think finding other spots that a paper copy can be housed, whether it's public libraries, community, just spots where someone's, me coming up to a stranger and saying, fill out the survey about how to build trust with the police is probably not gonna.
I got lots of spots.
Elicit more, but
Yeah.
I do think there are places, I mean, if we're intentional, there's no harm in collecting and seeing what comes.
I think that's a great idea.
So we have spots in some of most of our offices for,
Feedback.
you know, things of that nature. I mean, you know, so if we get the list together, I can see about, you know,
Just
getting
getting
those
in
out
the
and,
spots.
you know.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you all for that. Anything else in regards to community outreach?
My one last thought around the calendar, if we had a Google Calendar where each of us had rights to add events, then it could sort of be on all of us.
I thought about that, but I wasn't sure if that was breaking the open meeting rules the way that an email would. I wasn't
Right.
sure if a Google Calendar or Google Doc count.
We need to
I was
check
like, have
on
the
that.
rules caught up with that technology or nah?
I think placing activities wouldn't be an infringement.
As long as we're not, I think it's really discussions, like activities that we're doing. If we're just putting information on there, we're all sharing it, I think we might be okay. But we need to check on that just to be safe.
I'll ask the mayor.
We'll check on that. I think it makes sense. We're not actually having active discussions. We're just being, hey, this is the community. We share information. We can just go to this
Right.
meeting. So
In a way, we're maybe less likely if Jerry sends an email and I say, I'm going, and then Robert says, well, me too, then you run the risk of, you know, so it's almost easier if it's just adding an event. If I choose to copy it onto my personal calendar,
Can you
just
go-
have that, then I can look at it, but we could then have everyone filling it versus one person having to try to filter. So, yeah, if we, I mean, it could be an easy option.
We'll check on that, but I think it's.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Share Google Calendar.
I just didn't want to get in trouble.
Right.
Of course. Well, thank you all. Any other comments on that? Awesome. All right, let's move on to the town hall in April. Robert's been spearheading kind of, it's at Hillcrest, is that correct?
Correct.
So we need to nail down kind of the basic logistics and also kind of the framework for this. So Robert, tell us, as far as availabilities are, my thinking is probably that it should be on a weekday. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
That's my thinking about it. As far as, what do you think the best times are to have it? Do you want to keep it at 5? Or should we push it back a little later to give more time for people to get there? I'm just not sure.
What time was the previous meeting that we had off of Haywood Road last
Was
year?
that 5:30?
That was at 5:30?
At 5:30.
Okay.
Would that give more people time? So we had a pretty good showing, wasn't it? It was well attended.
Yeah, it was well attended, and,
I just want to give people time to get there.
sure.
If
Our
more-
community meetings have varied between 5:30 and 6.
What do y'all
Well,
about? I think at least 5:30. You guys want later than that? 5:45? Is 5:30 fine with everybody?
Yeah.
So I think we do that at 5:30. Makes sense. And we need to nail down a date. So my thinking is, I don't think we should have, it's up to you all, but I think this should replace the CPAC meeting, be in place of the CPAC meeting, should be the town hall. That's my opinion about it. And it's literally gonna be just the town hall. It's not gonna be any structured kind of thing, as structured as this. But we need to nail down, I think, too, is kind of what we expect the citizens to do as far as public comment. I don't want like a free-for-all, where just kind of people shouting and all that. I kind of want like a set structure as far as time limitations to speak. I mean, you can speak multiple times, I guess, but, limited to maybe 4 or 5 minute comments. We have someone like religiously checking that. And also another issue, I don't want kind of a back and forth with it either. I kind of want this to be, this is my thought, is more just information from the community.
Right.
We're gonna take it in, we're gonna harness it, and we're gonna, try to proactively work on it. So what are your all thoughts on that?
The one benefit of a town hall or any type of open forum is that there is, if we have answers that we could share, I think we do share them. But it also, conversationally, less formal with signing up opens up more opportunity for dialogue. If someone has to wait till 7 people to share their thoughts, so I don't know, it depends on how comfortable we are with shutting it down if it starts to get.
That's my concern, because I think it's out of control. That's kind of my concern. So I want everyone to have a chance to speak and everything like that, but I don't want to get heated and we're just arguing with each other.
Yeah.
That's my kind of concern. I understand the dialogue too. Potentially good to have it, but I don't know how you limit that. Is my issue.
And so, so we will post, is it that they're just coming up and just expressing themselves, or are we posting questions
I
to
think.
them, or?
I don't know.
Both.
What do y'all?
I think to me it's really setting the stage first to prevent any type of things getting out of hand, to really as we sit down with the community to say why we're here to elicit feedback from the community, we're here to bring this back to our committee, problem solve, build trust, build accountability, and do all of that with the community and APD. We may have some answers for your questions, we may not have answers for your questions, and we may have to bring that to our next formal committee meeting, which we invite you to always join, and we really set the stage for it. I think if there's any formalities, it should just be a time limit for people if they want to make a comment, just to kind of keep things moving. If there's a large number of people in attendance, if 5 people show up, I don't think we need to do that. I think particularly if you aren't going to board meetings on a regular basis and aren't familiar with all these rules of order, it feels very silencing to be told, wait your turn. It doesn't feel like we're building trust, accountability, or relationship with the community with all those formalities. And that was kind of the whole point of why we're doing a town hall. So if we're gonna do it, I say let's do it informal. So I would say, if anything, just kind of the only real structure I would say would be like a time constraint if there's a lot of people, but I wouldn't even mess with that if there's not a lot of people at the meeting. I think we had a large turnout in West Asheville, but I think there were a lot of issues around the opioid crisis, and Steady showed out, and we had the new chief, and he was there, and people knew he was going to be there. And I feel like West Asheville in our community is one of those neighborhoods that shows out to community meetings more than other neighborhoods. They're a very active community. I don't know if, I can't make any assumptions, but I'm not sure if everyone in Hillcrest necessarily wants to attend, and may not have that trust where they feel super comfortable coming to that meeting. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have a super high level of attendance there compared to Haywood at that church, because that's the only time we've had high level of attendance in the community. All the other ones have been a pretty small group. And I think if we can keep it informal and conversational with a small group, people will feel much more heard, and we'll get much more honest and open feedback from folks.
And on that note, if it's possible, maybe when we go to advertise for the town hall meeting, if we can just put something on there that just says that they can submit questions, if they can submit questions to
Beforehand.
someone,
Yeah, that's a good call
of us,
too.
then
Yeah.
we can, deal with the issue of confidentiality,
I like that.
and people being comfortable without putting them on the spot. So, that might be a good way to just
I think
get
that's
the
a great
information
idea.
out.
Yeah.
What I might offer too, I think we could collectively establish protocols in the beginning and just talk about sort of how we want to honor each other's voices, how we're here to actively listen, and maybe set timeframes around topics or themes based on some of the questions we get. So less about we're running over, but if we identify that trust is a concern, then let's sort of break it up over the course of, to move the flow so we don't spend the whole night on one concept and someone says, well, we never got to the part that I wanted.
I love breaking it down by concept instead of person.
Then when the time, and we could say there's a 5 minutes left on this concept before we move into, if we see a connection, we can talk through that connection, but we're going to have to move into the next concept.
Right.
And we won't know until we try.
Yeah, I think it's all new for us. Yeah, I think it's great. That's great. So when I'm gathering, keep it pretty informal, and kind of like set the stage early, and kind of tell them what we want to see out of the process, and just kind of let it like organically blossom. Is that kind of what we're thinking about that?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's totally fair. And then I like to submit any questions beforehand too. That's a great call. As far as that's concerned.
For the date, are you thinking the first week of
Yeah,
April?
what are you
or-
all thinking about?
So does it have to be, so today's the 4th, so.
It doesn't have to be the first week of April.
Well, okay, I guess,
Yeah, I
does
don't
it have
think
to
it
be
has
at least 30 days out?
Yeah, so I'd rather maybe do like the second week of
Yeah,
April to
that
give
would
some
be
time
better.
to get it out to the community. That'd be my thought process and everything.
So just a thought, the second week of April is spring break.
Spring break.
Good call.
And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I know both Christina and I are both on annual leave, just some conversation, and then neither one of us will be here that
And
week.
you'll just have a lot of people who might be traveling out of town, so it could hinder who shows.
It's like more
So
childcare
something for
responsibilities and
consideration.
stuff.
Yeah, these kids are out of school kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, so we said the second weekend,
When is spring break?
Yes.
Is it the
6th
10th?
through the 10th.
6th through
Yeah,
10th?
6th through the 10th. For Buncombe County, and
For
then I think
Buncombe
the
County.
week after that is Henderson County, I believe, which.
Asheville City's the 6th through the 10th as well.
Asheville City and Buncombe County, but.
Yeah.
I mean, the week of the 13th is a little longer, but I think that might be a good spot to do it.
I'm out of the country that week, but that doesn't mean that I mean, obviously y'all should pick the most viable date, but I
Yeah.
will.
I mean, what do y'all think? I'm not sure if the
Well,
state wise.
I'm, I don't mind going to the, 4th week,
The 20th?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
man,
wanna get too deep.
I want everyone to be here, is what it comes
Yes,
down to.
right. I'm thinking about board meeting and just, our staff, I would want some of our staff members to be able to be in attendance
Agreed.
and not tied up with something else, but,
Is that a better week for everyone? The week of the 20th of April?
I'd say yes.
Is that a better week for everyone? Because I want to make sure as many people can get here as possible. That's what it comes down to.
That gets us past Easter.
Yeah.
And it's past Easter,
Yeah.
which is very difficult. So I think, do we have a day y'all thinking, and you wanna keep it on Wednesday, keep it that way?
Wednesday we compete with church. If we're doing evenings, but
What about availability of Hillcrest, Rob? What do you think as far as?
That shouldn't be a problem. Wednesdays is normally our board meeting night.
Okay.
See, so I think the time,
It doesn't have to be on Wednesday.
yeah,
We can do Thursday, we can Tuesday, whatever.
yeah.
I'm
I'm thinking a
flexible.
Tuesday or a Thursday might be more ideal.
And maybe we do 10, maybe do, how about Tuesday the 21st? What do you guys think about that? Does that feel good? 5:30,
Then the same night as council,
city council meeting?
I don't know, I don't have a calendar, I can tell you. I wouldn't do it on the night of council, in case you're around council members or somebody else would show up. Go with Thursday, I think it would be fine.
Thursday too, I'm fine with Thursday. That works for me.
That is a council night.
okay.
It's 21st is, so I think we're looking at the 23rd, so Thursday, April 23rd at 5:30, is that what we're looking like? I think we should vote on this.
I stand corrected, the 21st is not a council night.
Not a council meeting.
Not a
Okay.
council night.
So what do y'all prefer, Tuesday or that Thursday? What do you think would be better for? I don't care either way personally.
I vote Tuesday for the housing authority's sake, because y'all are closed on after Thursday, so.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
You might as well not make time to fail.
Yeah, no, of course.
Your board meeting is in fact on the 22nd. I think that'll be good information.
That'd be great, so you can bring it forward.
To discuss that.
Yeah.
That's fine, too.
So let's do
Yeah.
Tuesday,
21st.
tentatively April 21st at 5:30 PM. You like, is that time good with everybody?
Yes.
Alright, so
Time, I'm sorry.
5:30 PM, and that'd be 4/21/2020. Can I get a motion to approve that date and time?
Motion.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of having a community meeting April 21st at 5:30 PM, say aye.
Aye.
It is so perfect.
Mr. Chair, is that taking the place of the?
I think that's gonna, I
regular-
mean, what do y'all, I think that should take up the CPAC meeting, that's my perspective. It's kind of a weird time, to be honest with you,
Yeah,
but that'd be my thinking.
I think that's right.
I kind of like the timing of it, because we can do it late in the month and then come back in
We can
May and
refresh
say,
May.
how'd that go? And
Yeah, so it's a quick
have
turnaround
some,
back.
a good feedback loop going about it.
So I vote that the town hall replaces the CPAC meeting for April. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Can we vote on that? So all those approving town hall replacing CPAC meeting for April, say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. I like the quick back to back too.
So my only caveat is I think we take that time we would have spent here
To work on
campaigning or,
this.
yeah, working to make sure that we have.
Especially because I like the idea of having surveys available.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get those out in the community like by late March this month. We can get those out, like, hey, we're doing a town hall meeting. If you have any questions for us, feel free. Any other concerns, let us know. Again, building trust and getting more people there. So I think we should really just focus on advertising this town hall meeting. I think it's very good. Does that work for y'all on that? And I think as far as structures go, I think we're pretty good on the structure side of things. I think we want to keep it as loose as possible. I think the only structure we really want to have is kind of, as Jerry mentioned, is kind of setting the stage early as far as what we want to do, get out of the meeting. So kind of give like boundaries a little bit, just a little bit. And that way we can I like the time limit on the concerns. So what pops up, then we can focus on that for a little while, transition. So I think we have a good structure in mind for everything. Do y'all feel the same way?
Mhm.
Okay. So I think we're good there.
While we're talking about structure, can
Yeah.
I pivot to a quick tangent really quick that Jeremy brought up
Yeah,
earlier? In the regular meetings, now can we add the public comment after presentations and have it in the we've talked about having it at the beginning and the end several times before, it just hasn't happened.
Do you want to do that on the follow-up though, the end, future items, or do you want to talk about it now? Either way, we can talk about it.
I can wait.
Yeah.
We can talk about it now, or we can wait.
Yeah, we'll just talk about it now, because you're on the pace with it, it's good. I mean, what do y'all think about that? So you want, how do you want that to look, Jerry? So public comment like immediately, like when you start the meeting, after approving the minutes? Or after presentations, kind of where does that fit the bill as far as the agenda?
We had talked about doing it at the front end and at the back end in case
Okay.
the public public has comments that we then wanna address in the meeting, cause sometimes we get to public comment and then there's like stuff we wanna get into and there's not really an opportunity to get into it.
Okay.
But I would also add, I liked Jeremy's suggestion a lot about having public comment after presentations. I think, you know, I get it, we have the rules of order and stuff, but if our goal is to build trust and relationship in the community, we should provide every opportunity possible for the community to ask questions and have their voice heard in this meeting. Otherwise, we're not really achieving our mission. So I would vote to have as much public comment as possible. So I say do it at the beginning, do it at the end, after every presentation, all the comments.
What do y'all think about that?
I know in the past, when we've not had quorum, we've,
Mhm.
we've opened up presentations on the front end to build a little time for us
Mhm.
to try and get folks in. And so in a way, if we stacked presentations on the front end, then we could have whoever was presenting, if there are 3 presenters, they present back to back to back, we
Mhm.
open public comment, we go through our agenda items, and then we close with public comment as well. And that should capture both opportunities. Without it, I feel like if we do public comment after, if we split.
It's gonna get bogged down.
It'll get bogged down.
I'm concerned about that.
And then it may, so anyway, that would be my thought with that we double it and we put the presentation stacked on the front end for that. What do you all?
I think I'm fine with that. Is after like someone speaks, like a presenter, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And then we have it at the end? Okay. What do y'all think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they have to leave, if the presenters have to leave.
I try to get them out quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Beforehand,
Yeah.
you know, guys
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So kind of, we have like, so we have like any updates, stuff like that, have a public comment for that, so specifically to that, tail to that, and then we move on to the next presentation, public comment, then public comment at the end for any other stragglers, is that right?
Yep.
Do you guys wanna vote on that now? Do you wanna wait on that? What are your thoughts, feelings?
I think we do it.
I'll move.
Yeah.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the new public comment structure?
I move to approve new public comment structure.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. No problem. Thank you for that, Jerry. Okay. All right, so I think we'll move on, done with that, to committee member regional concerns. I'll start with you, Jerry, anything on your end of things?
No, I've talked enough.
I'm good at mine of things. Jeremy, anything for you?
That's just what I asked Douglas about, some information about the Echo Hills neighborhood,
Yeah.
but you'll get that soon.
Awesome. Sandy, anything on your end?
No, I've already spoken it out.
Yeah, great. Robert, anything on your end?
No concerns.
Cool. So at this point, you know, we can discuss follow-up. So I think the follow-up we need to do is solidify what the agenda's gonna look like. I can work with that with Julie on that end of things, what it look kind of like a mock agenda would look like with the new public comments. Work on that. I think we need to get the survey in play.
Yep.
And then I think the biggest issue, again, I can follow up with, think about mediation, as far as what you think the structure should be. My thinking is that if it's between an officer specifically and a citizen on a specific issue, that we should be not running the mediation, but facilitating of someone who should run it. As far as confidentiality is concerned and all that, I think if we change the game on that, it would help alleviate a lot of the legal loophole issues. That's my concern. And then we can focus the other mediation issues on, again, with the town hall, we're understanding, hey, these are significant issues in the community. We can have a mediation as follows policy concerns that citizens are seeing between them and the police in general. That way there's no confidentiality issue, just simply the issues in the community. So that's how I think the branch should work. That's just my overall scope. Think about that. Obviously that could change, but that's how I feel about that. So just think about that on the horizon. And the biggest thing we do now is the town hall meetings, pushing that, solidifying that, and really making sure we get that out in the community. Any other issues or follow-up agenda items on your mind or anything like that, y'all?
Just a mention, a reminder, at our retreat, we discussed the option for work session
Mm-hmm.
1 month and then formal board meeting the next. We never really circled back around to that.
Okay.
We're sort of naturally doing that with the town hall.
Yeah.
But it's just, we should make sure we don't forget about that.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
There's a lot we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that makes sense. Alright, so let's do, any other concerns, future agenda items? Good. So let's get into public comments. Any public comments from anybody?
I'm like a producer, I should do, I always enjoy coming here. There's a couple of things, it's hard to have a hard fast rule about presentations. Sometimes people on the sideline have information that enhance a presentation or refute a presentation. Case in point, in HRCA, when Brad was in the room, we had people come in and live police cases, give testimony, and what was going on when how the police department. That was very difficult. We got caught with that. So that happened in the room. That's why I said it was not true what he said. Because we were undisciplined. We let people come in, get on the agenda, and they tell me what. Literally, we was on the agenda more than any member inside the meeting. Okay, we were not disciplined. I was here the last time and I said it was a bad idea to think that you should do anything with HRCA. I'm still saying that. That group is very, very dysfunctional. The confusion was self-inflicted. Here's something I'm not sure about. I'm going to check it out. There's a difference between a liaison and an advocate. The liaison between this committee, HRCA, and the city council should be a conduit, not an advocacy. I think the question about how you relate to HRCA was born out of advocacy on the part of Keith Young. I'm sure about that. And Brad did some advocacy on his own. Anytime a lawyer says, I want something, that's an advocacy. That's not being advisory. Okay? That's not being a liaison. I'm going to go back to the committee and I'm going to recommend a couple of things. One is I'm going to recommend that Keith not be a liaison for both committees. But as a conflict there, they sort of slipped into advocacy and poisoned the well, and then they back it out saying, do what you want. It was too late. That idea had been planted. There was a solution looking for a problem. I'm looking at another possible place right here, which is mediation. I concur. This is not the variety for mediation. You don't have skill set to do that. Okay? We have people that are professional people who know how to do that. That's not your job. That conversation not be happening in this room. This attorney here said the answer was no to your question. The answer was no, no mediation. Absolutely no. And not drag it on. I'm going to put that to bed. I want to make an offer to you. I've spent a lot of my life in large group interventions, large group conferences. I'd like to visit your committee that's going to plan at April the 21st meeting and offer my input on how to design that kind of thing, minimize conflict, especially volatility between police department and some community members, and not create a unnecessary conflict. I think there's a way to mediate that. I want to make myself available to your committee. This has been my first one that day, and it gives you for April 23rd. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Anyone else have any comments, concerns? All good? All right, so I think we're ready to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning the meeting say aye.